fasting to lose weight. We're doing it for one reason, and that's for Allah, and that's it, right? Our reward for fasting is in Allah's hands. That's the only reason we're fasting, right? And so when it comes to your workouts, it's the same thing. Why are you working out, right? It's a gift that Allah has given us. Then when we return, in what condition are we going to return this gift, right? So for me, that's something that's always really important that I always ask myself when I go into workouts or when it comes to eating healthier is that how am I going to return this gift that I was given, right? So when it comes to Ramadan's, very quickly we think about it, it becomes the month of feasting. And alhamdulillah, like we don't want to take that away from anybody either, because it's still like I think about some of my best memories growing up as a kid. It was my mom's fried food, right? That was the stuff I still think about to this day. Like some of the food that my mom made and the families get together, because food is a very communal thing, right? It brings the community together, right? When you go out with friends or family, you don't be like, hey, let's just go sit somewhere and just stare at each other. No, let's go eat, right? It becomes a very uh, celebratory thing. We're not looking to take that away, but we are looking to make certain adjustments that allows you to do best of both. Are you ready? Yeah. Okay. So what we're gonna do is we'll start off with nutrition, then we'll do fitness, and then we'll do Q&A. We'll keep an eye on the clock to make sure you guys don't go over. But if we do go over time, then inshallah, we can always discuss maybe outside or something as well if we need to.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's okay. No, it's fine. I'll just hold it. Okay, so I will get started with the health benefits of fasting. Generally, when we talk to people, they're like 30s plus, and so the health issues really start coming up. So for a lot of you, you guys are a lot younger, but it's nice to cover. So obviously, when we fast for religious reasons, right? This was before fasting was trendy. We did it because this is a part of our Islam. So the past, like I would say, 15-ish years intermittent fasting became really trendy, right? Before, I remember when I was younger, if I'd try and tell someone I'm fasting, it was kind of embarrassing because they'd be like, "Oh, that's weird. Are you okay?" But now it's like, "Oh yeah, I'm fasting too," right? So it's very trendy. So the great thing with that is there's so much research being done on fasting and their health benefits as well. So now we can kind of get an idea of what that can do for us as well. Now, the interesting thing is a lot of times at the end of the month of Ramadan, we feel so horrible. Right. Our energy is low. We feel, and you're like, but fasting is supposed to have health benefits. And so a lot of times we say, oh, because I was fasting this month, oh my God, I'm so tired. I don't feel good. But all of those negative outcomes are often due to what you do in that non-fasting window. So what you're consuming, how, horribly you're eating, that's what's resulting in the negative effects. It's not necessarily the fasting itself. Fasting in terms of health benefits, so there's of course weight loss. That is usually just while you are fasting. So once again, once you stop fasting, that will likely come back. And then a lot of people during Ramadan, they end up gaining weight and they use a lot of like excuses like, oh, because my body went into starvation mode. No, 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 it's none of that. It's because you end up eating more calories in Ramadan than you do in any other month, right? And then in terms of health, so cardiovascular health, so things like cholesterol, it helps improve your cholesterol levels. So it's really great for a lot of, I'm pretty sure everyone in here has either a parent or grandparent that has diabetes or cholesterol issues, heart issues, right? And so fasting actually helps with that. But it's only going to be as helpful with what you do in that non-fasting window. So if you're fasting but making horrible food choices, you're not going to see these benefits. The really interesting one that is relevant to all of you guys is the cognitive benefits. So it actually helps with your memory. So this is a really great time to obviously memorize the Quran, but obviously for a lot of you that have to memorize stuff for school, you guys can really make use of this time. So you might be like, that's weird because I fasted and I felt horrible. Once again, think about what you're doing outside of that fasting window that is likely going to impact it. But we can actually use fasting as a positive for even your study habits. You're gonna have to press next. Okay, so let's walk through suhoor first. Now, suhoor I find is an easy one to make like good choices because you're kind of like you're on your own, right? It's not a social thing. So this is where I think everyone can really make a big change. I find there's three different types of people when it comes to suhoor. So the first one is you'll just sleep through suhoor because you're like, okay, I need my sleep. Second is you'll wake up, maybe have some breakfast type foods, maybe like a bowl of cereal. And then the third type of person will have the full. Okay, and then the second is breakfast. You'll have like some quick breakfast, and then the third is having a full dinner spread. Yeah, okay. Those, yeah. So that's usually when you have a mom that's like cooking for like an or is the first the last two categories are okay, breakfast or dinner, but you got to wake up. For those of you sleeping through suhoor, and I know you're a lot of times we think, what's the point of me even waking? Another reason would be like, I don't feel hungry at that time, obviously, because it's not something that we're used to. Now I find our fast hours are starting to be not on 5 a.m. So it's not, it doesn't feel like as middle of the night as much. But most importantly, suhoor opportunity to nourish yourself. If you're not eating suhoor, you're essentially having a 24-hour fast. You're going iftar to iftar to iftar for 30 days. So we don't want that. Okay. So this is your last opportunity. So these are 5 components of suhoor I want you guys to have. So the first one is everyone has white bread. It could be cereal. That depletes your energy really quickly. That's why by the time 8, 9, 10 a.m., you're already hungry. So a bowl of cereal is probably one of the worst things you can have, or a piece of toast. Instead, you want to swap it with a whole grain carb. So that could be something like your oats. You can still have your breads, but switch to more whole grain breads. Okay. Now, with those dinner type proteins, it could be like your leftover chicken, fish, that's fine. Or breakfast could be like eggs, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. Okay. The third piece is your healthy fats. So it could be as simple as the sometimes it doesn't make sense to have both, like veggies with an omelet or fruit with oatmeal. But what this is going to do, this helps towards both your water content. So there's a lot of water in the fruits and vegetables. So that will help. And then it'll also help with a lot of the nutrients. So you know all the vitamins that we hear about? And if you are just eating brown foods the whole month, so think about rice, like bread, meat, just brown foods, there's no nutrients. So we need to eat a little bit of different colors. And then lastly is your water intake. So we want to try and aim for the same amount of water you would drink outside of Ramadan. I know a lot of you guys are probably staying up late. Try and aim for anywhere from 500 ml to 750 ml. Okay. You might think it's a lot of water, but it's actually not. So give yourself maybe like half an hour for suhoor time. As soon as you wake up, start sipping on the water, right? And then like as you have less than a week away, but even now, if you get into habit, as soon as you wake up for Fajr, just try and drink through a bottle and you'll get used to it. Because otherwise it's like the first few days of Ramadan, it's a little bit more challenging to get used to. So you guys can start doing that. And then also at Maghrib time, get used to drinking a big bottle of water. So you might be thinking, okay, so foods, you don't need a lot of food. It's about the quality. So could you click to the next slide? Thank you. So these are just examples of like from our book. We also have on our website. So on the left is overnight oats. We make this a lot because you can just make this for the week. It's just like in a jar, put all the ingredients. Like this one is an baked omelet. So you can just prep it for the week and just cut into squares. So a little bit of prep time. And I find the overnight oats that we can prep, just a moment to think about what the purpose was it for you to just overconsume all your food, break your fast and eat like 3 times the amount of food? And for us to do that 30 days straight, it really kind of neglects the whole purpose of iftar and Ramadan altogether. So be mindful of that with your intention. Next slide. So the first step is changing how we break our fast. So a lot of times, especially as we get closer to breaking our fast, you get like hungrier, you smell things, you're like your hunger level and you're like ready to eat. And so often we end up going to like the appetizer fry type foods, right? We'll end up eating a plate of food quickly. We're still hungry. We'll go pray Maghrib and then we'll sit down. We'll have our dinner food. We'll have even more food. Now, let's think about what scientifically what happens in our body. So there's actually signals that get sent to our brain, and it takes 15 to 20 minutes for those signals to kind of match up with your food, with your stomach, and for you to be like, hey, I'm actually full. So think about that. So when you're eating super quick, you know how sometimes you're eating and you're like, oh, I'm still hungry. I can still keep eating. But then after iftar, everyone has like a spot in the house and you're like, oh, I'm so full. I can't move. It hits you after. For you to do that occasionally, like on Eid, that's fine. But for you to do that every single day, 30 days straight, that's not very beneficial for you. So what we want to do is just kind of align up our body signals with how we're eating. Also think of the hadith. I'm sure many of us have heard, the Prophet ﷺ said that we need to fill our vessels with 1/3 food, 1/3 water, 1/3 air. A lot of times people are like, how am I supposed to know what 1/3 is, right? So if you're eating till you're full at the table, you've already exceeded that because once again, those signals, by the time you move away, you're going to feel even fuller. So you almost, doesn't mean that you have to eat so little, you're starving, but you want to kind of just have less portion size. So when you open up your fast, your dates, of course, so that's when you want to do a big glass of water. A big glass of water is 500 ml. And then you can do a little bit of fruit. That'll help you give some natural sugars. Now, the most difficult part is that's it. Just eat that, go pray your Maghrib Salah. And so in that time, the 10, 15 minutes it takes you to just have the water, fruit, pray your Maghrib, come back, you'll still be hungry, but you'll notice you're not like extremely hungry. And you'll be able to make a much better choice when it comes to how you're breaking your fast. So no matter where you are, you can do this. If you want your fried foods, don't do it before Maghrib. push it to after. It makes a huge difference. And so one of the things is a lot of times people think, oh my God, that's like sounds so diety and miserable. So at home, what we do is like we have kids, they're responsible for the fruit. So get the nice fruit. It doesn't have to be like the boring, apples, oranges, and bananas every single time. Get the good fruit, put that out. Generally, as a household, what we do is we only keep the fruit out. We keep the food in the oven, and then we'll go pray Maghrib and then take the food out. So I know sometimes it might be a little bit challenging for you guys to convince your family members, but even if you're for yourself, you kind of set yourself, a good platter of fruit, you have that ready. Eat, pray your Maghrib, and then come back will make a big difference. So no matter where you are, this is something you guys can all implement. All right, so now this is like the next level. Like if you're ready to kind of commit even more to making changes, it's kind of these guidelines. So we've already done, we had your dates, water, fruit, we had our maghrib. Now we're gonna what's on our dinner plate, right? So this is no matter what you're eating, these are things that we can kind of incorporate. One trick is make your plate once. Right. A lot of times we just kind of make our plate and we're like, oh, I'm gonna go again. Like you don't even know what you're eating. Like a lot of times we'll ask our clients like, okay, what do you generally eat? And you cannot like people cannot recollect what they eat. So we're so mindless with how we consume, right? If I ask any of you guys like, hey, tell me what you guys ate this week, you have no idea. You're like, I don't know, like, right? So just be more mindful. Make your plate once. So with your plate, generally it ends up being full plate carbs, right? Whether it's like the full plate of rice, full plate of pasta. Once again, don't cut out the carbs. For you to eat healthy, you should not be cutting out the carbs, especially after a long fast. And especially for all of you guys are using your brain a lot. Your brain needs carbs. Okay. So we don't need to cut out the carbs. We just need to be mindful. So instead of the full plate, you want to be about quarter plate with carbs, whether that's your pasta, your rice, your potatoes, your bread, choose one. And then if you want the fried food, so like the samosa spring rolls, count that towards your carbs, right? Don't double, triple. Don't do, I'm going to do fried food. I'm going to do rice. I'm going to do bread. Choose one type of carb for that night. You can do quarter. You can even do up to a third of your plate. And then quarter to a third plate of protein, right? So that's your chicken, your meat, you kind of want to make sure you're having enough of that. A lot of times it's just like small pieces kind of dispersed in the curry or rice. So a little bit more. And then the veggies, that's one thing that's often missing. There's like non-existent vegetables at the iftar table. So if you guys have your family's kind of cooking for you guys can be the ones to be like, all right, I'm going to take responsibility for the veggies. That could be salads, that could be roasted veggies, but you got to have your veggies. Okay. So it could be something simple as broccoli, whatever, or ask your parents to cook some veggies. Just don't overcook it. You want to make sure you're still able to see those colors. If you're feeling hungry after doing your plate once, you want to have seconds for your protein and veggies. All right. Try not to fill up on the carbs. It's more the protein and veggies, and you should be okay. All right. So once again, when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about diet food. I do want it to be enjoyable still for you guys. So these, once again, are examples from our book. But like, for instance, you can have chicken and rice. You can have curry and rice. The one we like in our family is like a chapli meatloaf. So just like a big hunk of meat. But you can have all these things. It does not have to look like bland, boring food. It can be your cultural food. It can be your family food. But what you're putting on your plate and the portions, that makes a big difference. And once again, after a long day of fasting does not mean we need to eat 3 to 4 times our fill, right? We're essentially just having one meal. Now, a common challenge is, especially now we have like Ridgeway, we have like iftar buffets, all that stuff. Hopefully, try and avoid the iftar buffets. I find those are just, I don't know. We've done that when we were younger, pre-kids. Obviously, we can't do it anymore. But I'm like, this kind of sucked. I'm like, you go there, it's like all hyped up, and then I'm like, the food was like you're waiting for your turn for food. You end up eating so much, and then you feel horrible. So I'm like, I don't know if that's something you guys want to do regularly. Maybe just schedule it out like once in the month. But if you're having iftar outside of the home, obviously with family and things like that, generally there's gonna be no vegetables. So if that's the case, just have more protein, right? And then carbs, right? So when you're thinking about carbs, there's 2 cues that I also always like to think about. So the first one is your quality. So if you're able to choose a good quality, more whole grain, that's ideal. But if there is no good quality carb, you have all white, white breads, white pastas, that doesn't mean you skip out on the carb altogether. So next you want to think about the second cue, which is your quantity, right? So as long as you limit your quantity, so whether choose your carb, right? So generally when you're at someone's house or even at home, there'll be multiple types of carbs. So there'll be some, pita, there'll be some roti, or there'll be rice, pasta, potatoes also count on carbs. Instead of having one of each, that ends up, quadrupling your carb amount. Just choose one and limit your portion. And then generally in Ramadan, you'll find, abundance of fruit options. So that's a good option that you can just have another serving of fruit as well. Okay. So then the non-fasting hours, which is our nighttime, right? And I think this is super relevant for all of you guys because I'm pretty sure you guys are staying up late. Now, one thing to keep in mind, what you eat at nighttime is going to impact how you feel the next day. Okay, so just remember that. Some days you have those fasts where you're like, oh man, I really feel it. Like today's a really hard fast. Think about what you had the night before. If you had fried chicken, that's probably why you feel horrible. If you had, all those sweets and desserts, late night hang, and you ate a lot of like sugary drinks, that's going to impact your next day. So be mindful of what you have. Doesn't mean you shouldn't eat anything, but just a really good snack, a small serving snack could really help. Now, depends on your goals. So if you're not lifting too heavy and things like that, just a small amount, something like some nuts and fruit. Try not to do the fried foods. If you do fried foods at night, you're going to feel extremely lethargic and thirsty the next day. So small serving. If you are working out and you want to kind of make up your protein intake, you can do like a protein shake. You can do a smoothie at nighttime as well. That'd be another good option. And then keep in mind, water post iftar is a really like Tarawih time. You want to kind of catch up on your water. So that will be almost a liter of water. When you're having iftar at the same time, you don't want to be drinking too much water because then you'll feel bloated. You won't feel too great. But I would say about an hour after iftar up until bedtime is catch up on your water. And especially if you're having a hard time drinking enough at suhoor, this is a really good time for you to catch up on most of your water. The goal should be 2 liters per day. Okay, every single day you should be doing 2 liters. So just kind of map it out. Take a moment to be like, okay, how much water am I having at suhoor, iftar, and then post iftar? All right, next. Okay, so this is a actually good activity we did recently. Where okay, if you're here, and the table's in front of you, how are you gonna make your plate? So if anyone wants to, we're gonna make a healthy plate. So when you first look at this, you're like fasting. You might want to grab all the things, but how can we make?
Face value, right? So if you were to, so it looks like a lot. So if so, I ask you guys, all right, so you got to make a plate and you got to make it healthy. Only picking the stuff that's there. What would you guys choose? You can say it out. Don't worry, I don't care about raising hands. Just say it out. Anybody?
Take the dates first.
We'll take
Yes.
dates. All right.
Alhamdulillah. Dates first. All right. So from there, all right. So now you broke your fast and everything's good. You read Maghrib Salah. You came back. This is what's on the table. All right. Let's start with one thing. Somebody name one thing that you would pick from here. Yes, brother. The soup. Okay. Awesome. Kebab. Okay. Salad.
Yeah, there's some salad.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay. Awesome. We said healthy.
So that we're skipping, then we
Vast majority of gatherings you go into, you'll be shocked that if you actually take a step back and actually analyze what you need. So, for example, for me, it would be really easy. I'm going for the rice and I'm going for the protein. I'm going to load up probably half my plate with as many protein as I can. From there, a quarter of it will probably be some form of carbs because I worked out that day, so I'm gonna need my carbohydrates. And then the rest of it, you got veggies. I'm gonna stay away from all the drinks because it's all just sugar and nothing else. And then from there, you get the veggies, it has all the fiber and nutrients you need. I got the carbohydrates and to give me energy that I need, and then the protein for my to making sure it has a muscle building for me. So then from there, alhamdulillah, I'm good. That'll fill me up easily. Right. So that's one thing I always think about. When you go into settings, you'll be shocked at how quickly you can actually make a plate if you just take a step back and be like, hold on, what can I actually take? Right.
yeah. So I think it's a lot easier for us to do this right now, but obviously when you're fasting, you don't have to try everything, right? A lot of times we're like, oh my God, we have to eat. You don't have to try everything. Alhamdulillah, we have serious first world problems is like our fridge is gonna be full every single night. And then our complaint is, you want me to eat the same iftar again today? No, mom, I already ate that yesterday, right? That's our problems right now. So clearly we just make better choices. And it's a lot easier. So no matter what we have in front of us. Next. All right, so this is an infographic we share every year on Instagram. And so when you think about samosas is like the mascot of Ramadan. But if you were to have 3 samosas every single day in Ramadan, at the end of the month, it's 90 samosas. Okay, now let's add our other spring rolls. Let's add in the pakoras, all of our different fried items, right? We end up having 2 to 3 of each. So at the end of Ramadan, we've had hundreds of fried items. still a lot. Like imagine any other month we came in, we're like, hey, you guys can have 30 samosas as part of a healthy diet, right? You'd be like, that's crazy. But in Ramadan, okay, if you guys do one a day, it's still 30, right? So be mindful, think about this, think about how many hundreds you've eaten in the past, and this is one simple change that you guys can make as well. All right, so we'll transfer over to the fitness.
So there's a few things to kind of take away from that, right? Think about it this way. So, for example, we just got back from California. We did a talk in close to Huntington Beach, and when we did our talk, I'm not like we had a lot of converts there, right? And speaking to them, this is their for a lot of them, it was their first time fasting, and it was interesting because like when I think back to when I became an adult, I went back to do the Judeed classes, right? Because I realized a lot of what I learned, I need to relearn, right? The hardest part wasn't learning, it was unlearning, right? So when I'm speaking to the converts, I realize, wow, mashallah, they have a step up over all of us because they don't need to unlearn anything. They just need to start, right? And they're already taking off on the right foot. So they're already ahead of most of us. So for us, so for you guys are still relatively young, you don't have as much unlearning to do just yet, especially when, if once you start walking into that phase of, marriage and kids and you have your own place and all that stuff, you can easily start establishing that now, right? But the biggest thing is don't be that person that starts telling others what to do, right? Just lead by example. Like we've all been in those settings, and this is really prevalent in MSAs and stuff. And I'm talking about from seeing it personally from experience. When someone starts to become practicing, what's the first thing they do? They start telling everybody else what to do. They start making sure everybody knows how much they know, right? You don't want to be that person. In fitness, it's the same thing. As soon as someone starts to be healthy, you go into a gathering, what's the first thing they start doing? Like, all right, I figured it out. This is what you got to do. Like, brother, calm down, right? And so that's one thing to kind of keep in mind is that when it comes to stuff at home, because I'm guessing the vast majority of you guys still live at home, obviously, because you're going through university, don't say anything, right? You can have a conversation. That's one thing. Like, hey, I want to try doing this and X, Y, Z, and so forth. That's fine, but don't try to step and be like, don't do this or don't do that. Don't have this available. No, let everybody have what they're having, and then you have your own stuff that you're eating and partaking and understanding how to be able to pick and choose from within that, right? Once they start to see, oh, their energy is a lot higher than everybody else. They're moving around, they're doing stuff, people will end up partaking. And it's the same thing with us with our parents and so forth. We never said a single thing to our parents, but they just started joining in because they started realizing, oh, they're starting to, they see the difference in us. And we come home one day and we see salads and other stuff that's healthy, and we never thought we would. So that's one thing, is just lead by example. So when it comes to fitness, it's very counterintuitive that most people think when it comes to fasting and being able to work out and so forth. But it has, as you guys can see, increased energy, strength, mobility, cardiovascular health, weight loss, minimizing pain, reducing stress. And I think, but the one thing to keep in mind is when people think about working out and what working out actually is usually two very different things. Because you look at social media, what's the first thing you see working out? People doing burpees, they're jumping up and down, they're absolutely drained. You're having to basically crawl out of a gym. There is a time and place for that, right? But that isn't the case the vast majority of time. And it definitely is not during the month of Ramadan. When you look at your workouts, you got to look at it from a year perspective. You should never be looking at it from, all right, what am I doing today? Or what am I doing next week? What am I doing next month? You should plan out your workouts for the entire year. And then you should be able to go through different aspects of certain goals that you want to try to accomplish, right? That allows you to be consistent. You know what's coming next. So it removes any kind of anxiety and stress and decision-making fatigue that you're going to get, because it's almost inevitable to get that. On top of that, there's a plan in place, because what is every, so for example, if you're talking about guys, right? What does every guy want to do? Wants to get lean, wants to get ripped, wants to lift heavy. Every single person. It's almost impossible to do all three things at the same time, right? It's very difficult. And the reason why I know that is because I've been guilty of that. And every single guy I have, and I'm talking about just guys in their 20s, I'm talking about 30s, 40s, they all say the exact same thing. They want to achieve it all at the same time. But there's different phases that you should be. I'm not talking about the bodybuilding, bulking, cutting, or any of that stuff. But it's harder to be able to put on muscle when you're lowering your calories to lose weight. It's not impossible, it's just a little bit more difficult. But that's not a bad thing, right? So in Ramadan, right, when you talk about some of the benefits, when you talk about your workout should give you a step up. It should give you a pop in your step. It should give you more energy. You should feel better after your workout. You shouldn't feel drained in your workout. And I'm going to tell you guys how to be able to go to your workout, but that's the one thing to keep in mind. If you, after every single time you work out, you're feeling absolutely exhausted, that's having an effect on your fast, then you're doing it wrong, because the main goal of Ramadan is what? Spirituality, right? That's the first and foremost goal. right? So if anything affects that negatively, then that's not a good thing, right? But that does not mean that we stop our workouts. We make certain changes in this 1 month. You have 1 month out of 12. You have 11 months to be able to go hard and do everything you want to accomplish. In this 1 month, the goal is to take a step back, not stop, take a step back. And I'll explain how that works. But the great thing is improving your strength, your ability. I talk about cardiovascular. So we'll talk about actually how the difference fasting has on your endurance and stuff as well. Weight loss is actually really easy, especially if you follow the nutrition aspect of it. It's not very difficult. It's just making sure that we're making the right choices, right? So how to stay active in Ramadan? Here, go to the next one. All right. So when it comes to working out, I say at least 3 times. So I put 2 to 4 because sometimes, if people are really busy. But for university students, honestly, 3 to 4 times is ideal, right? You guys should be able to find that time. 30 to 40 minutes at the very least. It's not a lot. So if you take about 3 workouts, you're doing 30 to 40, the 168 hours in a week, that's less than 3 hours that you're being required to be able to work out. If you want to avoid the gym in this month, that's fine. You can easily do this at home, right? But so when I say strength training, right, I should write resistance training because the reason why is people associate strength training with lifting heavy and so forth, even though that's a technical term for it. It's not about how much you can lift. It's making sure that you're consistently lifting, right? So when it comes in order for you to, there's 2 ways to build muscle, right? The 2 ways are your protein intake, your daily protein intake, not immediately after your workout. It doesn't matter how much time has gone from when you work out to when you take your first protein intake. That doesn't matter. What matters is making sure your daily protein intake is up and making sure that you are adding resistance to the muscles, right? So some form of resistance, right? Doesn't have to be heavy, but you have to make sure there's some form of resistance there. Those 2 elements are key to helping you build muscle. And from there, but when it comes to working out, what I want you guys to think of an archer, right? The further you pull back, the farther that bow goes, right? That's what Ramadan should be. You go back. So if you've been working out consistently for years, right? You need time throughout the year where you take a step back and you refocus on the foundational movements in your workout. So improving your range of motion, going deep into end range, focusing on re-improving your squat. So even if you're starting out for the first time, it's a good time to start because you should, especially in the beginning, you shouldn't be trying to go all out. You should be focusing on improving your hip mobility, improving your ankle mobility, strengthening your grip. Your grip is significant on getting a nice strong grip strength. Looking up exercises to be able to do that. The goal shouldn't be trying to put on muscle in this month because it's almost impossible because you just don't have the same window to be able to put on muscle. That doesn't mean you have to lose muscle. You can still definitely preserve the muscle you have, but you can still improve your strength. And that you'll notice once you start working on, improving your core strength, the vast majority of people have like lower back issues, will have knee issues. It's not your lower back and knee that's the issue. It's the muscles in and around it that aren't doing their job, right? So for example, if your hip flexor muscles are very tight, it's gonna put a lot of pressure on your hip. All that pressure is gonna go to your lower back, right? If you don't have strong feet to be able to power into the ground and hold your position, like being able to just stand on one foot and being able to stay strong and stable, that if someone moves you or pushes you, you'll be able to stay strong. Once you start running, that pressure is going straight to your knees, right? So for example, like running is a one-legged exercise, right? And I'm not, because a two-legged exercise means both feet are planted at the same time. A two-legged hop is a two-legged exercise. But a walk, you plant, you let other leg comes forward, you plant, right? So same thing when it comes to running, right? You need to be able to power into the ground, right? Push into the ground. Your hamstrings have to really flex for you to be able to take off for the next one, and then the foot lands for the next leg to then take pressure, right? So for example, when you think about people who pull their hamstring, people don't pull their hamstring when they're stretched out. They pull their hamstring when they power into the ground. Because what happens is your hamstring goes into a stretched position, and now it has to go back into that cycle of now, once being in that stretched, elongated position, it has to power into the ground. And if it's not used to doing that, or say you were cold when you're going into a workout or into playing basketball or soccer or anything else, what ends up happening? It doesn't have the ability to stay strong in that position. So in Ramadan, it's a really good time to be able to work on improving your range of motion and then being strong in that range of motion. So building that foundation and really solidifying that foundation. And I promise you, because I've been doing this for years, I love my workouts on Ramadan. They're relatively easy, right? They're consistent on how I build them. But after Ramadan, my strength, it takes a week or two to get my strength back up. I don't lose anything, but I notice a huge difference. Like I'm quicker, I'm faster, I'm stronger, I feel better. Like, because now I have food and water available to you, right? It's like, you imagine taking like an energy drink. You're just like, whoa, that's how it feels after Ramadan. That's how it should feel at the very least. Even spiritually, that's how it should feel. That you're like, whoa, right? Because you've just been consistently focusing on getting stronger and improving, right? Next one. All right, so cardio. So this is actually really cool. So there's research done on fasting, especially because of soccer players in Europe. They did a lot of research on it, and they showed that to increase your one repetition max, right? So your one RM, sorry. It's almost impossible to do that in the month of Ramadan because lack of sleep, because your sleep will be affected. Also, you might not be working out as much, and then your food intake, your hydration, etc. Everything gets smaller in that month. But one thing they showed is fasting actually improve your endurance. So this is one time if you do want to improve your cardio, you can definitely do that. Now just be mindful on how you go about it, right? Because if you're working out in the fasting time, it might get a little bit more difficult because if you're not used to it, right? But you can actually improve your endurance. So it's again, if you want to be a strength athlete or if you just want to lift heavy and so forth, and you've been ignoring or neglecting your cardio, Ramadan's a good time to be able to do that, right? Next one. So mobility stretching. So similar to what I talked about. Being able to sit in that position with your ankle back in tashahhud position, that's mobility. Requires you to be able to sit there for longer periods of time. Improving your squat, your deep squat position, being able to go into a deep like side lunge. If you guys look up like Cossack squats, going into improving your range of motion, being able to get deep on both sides, stuff that you generally would not work on outside of Ramadan because why? Because you go into the gym, you just want to go hard, and then you want to go home. But you shouldn't be doing that on Ramadan anyways. Even if you're working out after iftar and you have food and water available to you, right? And the reason why is because your sleep is going to be affected. It's almost inevitable for your sleep to be affected because you're going to sleep late and then you're waking up really early. So your recovery time is significantly lower. How do you build muscle or get stronger? Is it during the workout or after the workout? After, right? During that workout, you're not getting anything in that. In fact, you're doing the opposite. You're actually beating your body down. So if your nutrients, your protein intake, your carbohydrates, your sleep aren't there, you're not going to reap the benefits of it, right? That's why if you look at those who are in really good shape, it's not the workout themselves. You look at their workouts, it's very simple, it's very basic. It's not the workout itself. It's everything they've been doing, making sure 6, 7, 8 hours, at least 7, 8 hours sleep every single night, making sure their hydration is up, what they're doing the day after, how they're eating, all that stuff matters. That's why it's important to make sure you're being consistent on your meals and your be up for suhoor. Then if you're going for the masjid for Fajr Salah, your sleep. Again, all those things play a factor. And then you still got the rest of the day. You still got school. You still got everything else you got to be thinking about. Right? So workout timings. This is one of the most popular questions. Mid-afternoon. So this is something that I don't recommend to everybody just because it is very difficult for some people to do. I did this for a while, but now my kids are a little bit older. I got dropped from the school and all that stuff. So I won't be doing this this Ramadan. But mid-afternoon, I noticed a huge difference in my energy. Like I'm talking about like right just after the Dhuhr Salah, right? And I would go home. I would pray the Dhuhr, I'd take a nap, and then I'd go straight to the gym. And I noticed a huge boost of energy in the rest of my fast for that day. But again, you don't have food and water available to you. I'm not worried about building strength or putting on muscle. I have enough strength. I know how much I can lift. I'm not worried even if I lost a little bit. Even if I say muscle, I lose a little bit, I'm not that worried about it because I know what I need to do in that sense, right? So if you do it that time, you'll notice a huge boost of energy. Right before iftar, this is the most popular one. You're gonna have food and water available to you soon after. You might have a little bit of energy left in reserve. It's good for depleting your glycogens and so forth. So when it comes to weight loss, that's the most popular. That's the one I would tell most people to do, just because your schedule allows it. It's a lot easier to do. After iftar, I'm not a fan of it. But I know most people in university, this is what I did in high school, is you become nocturnal, where you sleep all day and just you're up all night. I'm not a fan of it because your sleep is of the utmost importance. People ask all the time about supplements. Lately, I've been getting a lot of Muslim people ask me about steroids. I'm getting a lot of people ask me all these different things. I'm like, listen, if you want the greatest drug in the world, it's sleep. Good, uninterrupted sleep, quality sleep. That they say, what does it say in the Quran? Night is meant for sleeping, right? Do not But again, you have to go based on your schedule. Like I would love to be able to give you one time and one time and be like, yes, this is the answer. 1 + 1 = 2. Unfortunately, that's not the case. It's on a case-by-case basis. Everything will change from case to case. So individually, it will make a difference. Next one. That was it? Okay. So this is our book, The Healthy Ramadan Guide. We co-authored it. It is the first and only print copy on how to have a healthy Ramadan. Reached over 35 different countries. It's available on Amazon as well. We used to actually ship it and everything ourselves, but now alhamdulillah, everything is on Amazon. Makes life a lot easier. If there was an alternative shipping company, we would definitely do that. Unfortunately, Amazon is the only one that can get us worldwide, because then there were so many countries we couldn't get into. We couldn't send it to certain countries just because it was too expensive on their end and losing stuff and whatnot. So, the one thing when it comes to Ramadan, it's important for everybody to always remember is that it is a challenge, and it's supposed to be a challenge. We live very, very easy lives. Like we see what's happening in Palestine. We see what's happening in Sudan. We see what's happening around the world. There is nothing we can complain about compares to what they're going through, right? So when we think about challenge, that's why I love working out, because it's between me and me. That 50 pounds will always be 50 pounds. 100 pounds will always be 100 pounds. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It doesn't matter the mentality I walk in with. It doesn't matter how good someone makes me feel and be like, yes, I can do this today. No, you can't. You haven't put in the work. You have to go put the work in and you lift it. It will always keep you honest, right? That's why, especially, and I'll speak to all the guys here, especially for us guys, it's probably the most important thing I'd say, is because nothing will break your ego the way a weight will. Nothing. Because when you walk in, you see someone half your size and they're benching 225, and you're like, well, they put the work in, you didn't. There's no, and what does everybody say online? Oh, I took steroids. First thing, why? Because they're coping, right? So always keep that in mind. That's why I always say for men especially, don't miss the gym. Don't ever do that, especially in today's society, because we have it so easy. And because we have first world, every one of our problems is first world problems, we need to find ways to break our ego and break our nuts. That's why when you have something like dessert sitting in front of you, it's hard to say no. Why? Because it's halal, right? Someone brings a kunafa, I'm like, I can devour that myself, easily, regardless of how big it is. But it's hard to say no, right? But what are you doing? You're challenging yourself, right? You're fighting your nafs to be able to say no, and that's important, right? To be able to do so. That's one thing for Ramadan. Challenge yourself. I have a no fried food Ramadan. It's not easy. It's very sacrilegious, I know. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The first one was the hardest, especially going places, even my parents' house and stuff, we'd go over, and all there is fried food, and that's it. And then you're trying to find a way to, like, what do I eat? I went to a masjid, and I'm like, there's dates, and there's water, and there's a little bit of fruit. That's all I can eat. And I'm like, all right, I guess when I go home and eat, it is what it is. I'm like, this is not the worst thing. This is not going to kill me, and it's not the worst thing. There's people in the world going, this is all they can eat, is date and water. Even though the Prophet ﷺ said, this is all there was days where we had two black things, right? Dates and water. So I'm like, if this is the worst thing that's going through, alhamdulillah, challenge yourself. I'm not saying don't do that. Find your own challenge. Find something that will challenge you, that won't break your fast or won't break your Ramadan, but it'll help improve you overall as well, right?